Kevin made a particular investment in a North Dakota play, right?
That's right. Guys from PRX Fitness, who are here in Fargo, that had come into Shark Tank with foldable gym equipment. Kevin invested in that company, and then COVID, everybody staying at home really kind of was an accelerant.
Perfect timing for an innovative home gym for space and convenience.
Everybody in those times, converted their garages into gyms. They weren't leaving their homes. Yep. The company went to over $50 million a year in sales, and the studio decided to film a follow-up in the tank. So they sent him out here to do some ice fishing and create some really great B-roll. And, really that was the genesis of North Dakota for O'Leary Ventures. He had also been approached by some folks in the state who said, would you ever consider doing more? And so I came and spent some time and met the folks at Commerce. Almost immediately, I was blown away by the diverse economic underpinnings of North Dakota. Right. And so, you consider the state is 44 million acres and 39 million of it is ag. And then you quickly come to find out that they're feeding the country and the world. And the unique geology here kind of lends itself to innovation and the adoption of technology for ag and for sustainability. These guys are also innovating in carbon capture and rare earth mineral extraction and things that are going to be very, very vital to our success in the future.
And a huge Microsoft campus. It's really the center of electronics hardware for precision agriculture. We have a growing sort of pharma presence with plasmid manufacturing, and there's definitely a lot going on. So this was sort of mid to post COVID, and you're talking to Commerce, and what came from those conversations?
Well, Commerce had been granted money by the Department of Treasury under what was called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. And small business is very much on brand for Kevin and what he had been doing for, 15 seasons of Shark Tank at the time. Now we're on the 17th season. And then each one of these sharks then have become networks of their own. Kevin has close to 10 million followers through social media, and so that can be leveraged to tell the story of companies that he invests in. It can be leveraged to tell the story of the state in which he's focusing his investments in, and we've tried to do this. We had a vision that what we could do is establish our venture capital and private equity platform, scale it authentically in the state by engaging directly and having boots on the ground and making sure we did a lot of listening and learning, form a business thesis, and effectively achieve favorable returns if we stayed committed and focused. And so it started with an idea, and then it led to us competing in an RFP for these treasury dollars that had been granted to the state. A lot of restrictions on how that money is invested, which makes it difficult at the end of the day. People question, is it economic impact that you're doing? Is it, economic development, or are you return driven? Well, I'm here to tell you we are 100% return driven, but we know if we do a good job, it's going to have a tremendous economic development and impact effect throughout the state.
I'm Todd Pringle, and this is the Crosswinds Institute podcast. My guest is Paul Palandjian, the CEO of O'Leary Ventures. Paul is crisscrossing North Dakota on behalf of Kevin O'Leary, or as many know him, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank. Paul and Kevin are looking to bring investment and ventures into our state. We talk about Paul's background, Kevin's history with North Dakota, what the Wonder Fund is, the opportunity of data centers for North Dakota, and why our state, being one big small town, has unique advantages and is poised for more growth. All right. Did you actually get a decent night's sleep last night, or?
A little bit. Yeah, no. I always sleep well when I'm here. We've got the Jasper Hotel, which is I'm noticing somewhat of the living room to Fargo.
Yeah.
You hang out in the lobby there, you'll run into a lot of people.
Yeah, good food and nice views and good atmosphere and anything you want just downtown and easy walk to the studio. So you've been traveling to North Dakota quite a bit. I repeatedly run into you and gotten to know you over the past year or so. What keeps bringing you back to North Dakota?
Well, as you know, we're here actively managing money for the state of North Dakota, and we've established an asset management platform to service our commitment to the state, whereby we're investing $45 million into early stage companies, and just starting to build out our business platform here. So
maybe for the kids at home, introduce yourself and a little bit of who you are and how you got connected with Kevin O'Leary.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe bring the mic a little bit closer. Just move it a little. That is good. There you go.
Yeah, I'm Paul Palandjian. I'm the CEO of O'Leary Ventures, and I grew up in the Boston area. My father was an immigrant builder and Armenian, Christian Armenian, and my mother was a Roman Catholic, second-generation Irish lady.
Yeah.
And
that's an interesting mix.
It sure is, and they met and married and raised our family in the Boston area. My father had come to the U.S. to study at Northeastern, and he became an engineer, and he was playing the accordion in a band, wedding band, to pay his way through college. And my mom was at one of the dances that his band was playing at. They met and married, and the rest is history. I grew up in Boston with 4 boys, and my father, was very much with that immigrant mindset, wanted his kids to study hard and work hard, and we got involved in sports at a young age, and so not unlike North Dakota, and North Dakotans, I'm a huge hockey fan. I grew up playing youth hockey and also tennis, and ultimately, I chose tennis as the sport that I would focus on, and I was fortunate enough to have some success in that sport. So I played junior tennis, and from the age of 12, I traveled the country. I spent a lot of time in the Midwest playing tournaments, and I think that kind of shaped, some of what I see today. It was a time when you were a kid and you traveled for sports that you would show up at a tournament, and there was usually a family that would offer their home as housing to the athletes. And, I was, whether it was in Ohio or Chicago or Michigan or Texas, Alabama, I was welcomed into.
This is like high school age at this point?
This is junior high school.
Junior high school, you're 13.
In those days, we got on an airplane without our parents.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that, Todd. You might be a little young, but your parents would walk you to the gate and say, behave yourself and good luck.
Yeah, I remember my brother went to the National Boy Scout Jamboree at probably about 13 and sending him off by himself. Yeah, the resilience of children back then was a little bit different. So that's awesome. So you're traveling the country, playing tennis.
Yeah. That was, we would play most of the year locally and regionally, and then if you had a high enough ranking, you'd qualify for national tournaments, and those were played through the summer.
So were you thinking about being a tennis pro during this time? Was that?
That was every young athlete's dream, and so, when you're on the practice court, you're thinking, I want
So who are the stars at that point? Is that pre-McEnroe days, or is that the
in the 70s? So I started traveling probably mid 1970s, and it was Jimmy Connors and a crazy Romanian player by the name of Ilie Nastase. Some of the great Australian players were still active in the sport, and then you had Jimmy Connors and John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg that kind of came in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was a golden age for the sport of tennis. Very, very intriguing for a young athlete, and so yeah, we all aspired to that. And ultimately, my father wanted to make sure that we were all well educated, and that was an important value in the household, that we had to study hard but tennis ultimately became my ticket to college, and I played Division I college tennis, and then I did have the good fortune to play a little bit on the pro tour afterwards.
Oh, really?
But those were the days when, if you wanted to be a professional tennis player, you turned pro at 18 and you didn't go to college. Mm-hmm. It's changed a little bit now. The sport has evolved, and those college years are often a time when you can develop your strength and fitness to a degree that you can actually perform well now. But back then, you kind of sacrificed a pro career if you became a 4-year college student.
Sure.
But I was able to, in 1985, I was the eighth ranked amateur in the U.S.
Oh, that's impressive.
And then by the time I turned pro, I didn't think that I would have a chance to be in the top, 100 in the world, but I wanted to get an experience with it and see what I could do. I had beaten some people in college that were kind of top 200-300 in the world, and thought that might be a future for me. But I more or less used it as an opportunity to see the world. So in junior tennis, I saw the country, and then as a pro, I got to see the world, and I was exposed to a lot of different people and cultures and places, and in many ways, I think that helped, shape, how we think about things today in a business context.
And hyper competitive?
Super competitive. It's an individual sport.
All on you.
You're alone out there, and you find out what your strengths and weaknesses are pretty quick. And usually your strengths and weaknesses in the field of battle in a sport end up being your strengths and weaknesses in life. Mm-hmm. So I think it was a great way for me to become somewhat self-aware. I'm still working on that, but it was a great time, and
during this time, your father's building a real estate development, very successful operation.
Very successful. He was a builder, true and true, and he was a builder through and through, and he started to take surplus capital, and instead of doing construction for third parties, he started to develop properties and self-contract, and ultimately built up enough of a portfolio that it made sense for him to diversify into property management, development, finance. And so the company that I ultimately came into after college and a brief period of time on the tennis tour was a fully diversified, vertically integrated real estate company with all the disciplines under one roof. And I had taken a first job after tennis in banking, and so I became bank trained. And you're probably a little too young to remember this, but there was a savings and loan banking crisis.
I'm not too young. I just stay out of the sun. Us Scandinavians, we appear to age slower, but yep.
Yeah, but it was a time when the sky was falling in real estate. Mm-hmm. So, you had, I think the prime rate was at around 9 or 10%, and banks were failing. And then, our real estate, the family real estate portfolio was pretty solid and was not over leveraged. But overnight, banks, that had lent us money had failed, and we were dealing with the Resolution Trust Company, which was set up by the U.S. government to handle some of these bank failures, and they weren't lenders.
Right.
So they started calling the debt, and I was sitting in a cubicle at the Bank of Boston, and I got a call from my dad. I was about to take a job in New York at Merrill Lynch, and my dad said, "No, you don't. You're coming here. I need somebody to help restructure the company." He had gone completely upside down overnight and was facing a bankruptcy. So I mean, look, it was a brutal time, a lot of stress. We had tons of receivables as a general contractor that we couldn't collect because nobody could pay. Excuse me, and we had to go in there and do triage. And I had become bank trained as a loan officer and have the distinction of never having made a loan. I spent all of my time doing loan workouts, so my skill set at the time was actually pretty well suited for me to try to help restructure the debt and try to deal with the balance sheet stress that we had. And
so that's a big deal. I mean, if you're growing up and you're watching your father build this wildly successful business, and then you're an adult and you're developing domain knowledge in banking, and then if I'm hearing you right, that business is facing a real existential crisis, and come on in, son, help fix this, please. I mean, those are heavy. That's a heavy burden to bear, and real estate developers. I know quite a few, and they have a different. I admire, but don't resemble the risk tolerance when you inevitably have to manage, to me, insane amounts of debt to be able to grow, but to do that in a way that you can survive the externalities that hit with something as big as a banking crisis. So now you're pulled in, and you're no longer a tennis pro, and you're helping your dad restructure. So keep going.
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Well, no, he'd essentially gone broke, and having grown up with a lot of support. I hate using the word privilege these days because it's been distorted. But I had a very privileged upbringing, and then all of a sudden we were facing this existential threat. So in many ways it was trial by fire, and I grew up pretty quick. We had to professionalize the business. I remember distinctly trying to convince my father that we needed to spend $250,000 to buy computers for everybody in the company. Because until that time, all of our accounting and cash flow statements had been done by hand by a family member. And I also told him that kind of his culture of nepotism probably wouldn't work long term. We had cousins and uncles and relatives that were all working at this kind of boutique real estate investment company. To give you a kind of a sense of size, we were, he controlled about 10% of the office supply in Boston at the time. Wow. He had a couple thousand residential units. We owned a couple of ski areas in the Northeast, a wet water park. And so some of those businesses were operating companies as much as they were real estate deals that he had been involved with. And all of them were under distress. And so then, when you face that kind of pressure, the name of the game is to do the next right thing. And it's to buy time and hold your head high and try to find sources of fresh capital to replace the old capital and recapitalize the portfolio. And so over a 2 or 3 year period of time, from 91 to 94, we brought in some fresh capital. My brother came into the business with me, and together we were able to, essentially pay off all the debts. We had no bankruptcies, despite what the consultants were advising. They were saying you could file tomorrow and start NewCo, and that's a reasonable way to, and that was very common in those days. But I think my father had the mindset that his sons were going to be in business for a long, long time, and we didn't want the black mark of bankruptcy, and we needed to honor our commitments. So we paid all of our debts, all of our subcontractors that we owed money to, that we couldn't pay for a period of time, had tears in their eyes and a baseball bat in the lobby of our building saying, I'm not leaving this building until I get paid. And we tried to explain to them, we can't pay you, but we're going to give you new work. And we managed through all of that. And I think it really set the foundation for having a superb reputation in the Boston area as stand-up people.
I hear that a lot, like in biographies of very successful people. There was often a point where, some cases more than one point, where bankruptcy was advised and everything was on the line. And it seems a lot of those stories, by the time it gets to where the biography is being written, oftentimes it is the insistence to not file for bankruptcy, do whatever you can, that sort of long-term thinking. So when you got to the other side of that, and you're in the trenches, and you started to presumably sleep better at night and make payroll and pay bills and all that, and you're like, and the external market is less threatening. How does that transform like you and your outlook on things from a I can face things, and is there any tennis analogy or I'm interested in like how transformative of a journey for you that was.
Yeah, I think the mindset was always, we need to face and overcome this challenge. And in tennis, there is a corollary. Tennis is the only sport that you can literally be down 6-0, 5-0, 40-love, 1 point from defeat, and you can come back and win. In football or hockey, if you're up by 8 goals or 4 touchdowns and there's a time limit, there's no coming back from that. So I had an experience where I had been up by that much and lost, or down by that much and come back and won. And so I think, there was an openness, and there was definitely a competitiveness, and the values that my father had instilled in us kind of won the day, because we fought very hard and we came out of it with a clean balance sheet. A lot of respect within the local community, and then with some ideas on how we might transform the business going forward. And it's an interesting segue into how I met Kevin O'Leary, because sadly my father became sick with cancer and he died in 1996. And I had,
How old were you at the time?
I was 30.
Oh, that's young. It is young to lose your dad.
Yeah, he was only 59.
Wow.
And that was a tough one, because he was.
And you just gotten through. You came back working for your dad, and you get through really the potential loss of the entire thing that was built by him, and then you helped him resurrect it, and then things are going good, and then he dies. That's sorry. I don't want to.
Yeah.
That's not where I wanted to go.
No, it was very sad, and I still miss him, terribly today. He was only 59 years old, and he was a larger than life character.
What was his name?
Petros.
But
they called him Bob.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Petros is cool.
I do know why. My grandfather wanted to name him Petros, and my grandmother wanted to name him Robert. So she just called him Robert.
I'm going to win this argument one way or another. I'm going to call him Bob. Cool.
Right. But no, that was tough. And so my brother and I at the time were kind of looking at each other saying, okay, we've got a clean balance sheet. We've got a great platform. We've got a highly skilled organization. What do we want to do when we grow up? And we decided to shift the right-hand side of the balance sheet away from what had historically been a family and friends model of raising money. You would find an opportunity where you'd identify value, and you'd decide how much capital you wanted to allocate to that opportunity, and then you'd syndicate the rest of the equity. Usually the bank debt, if the banks were active, would be easy. So, we would leverage 50% of an investment, and we would raise 50%. And generally we would put in, around 50% of the equity and syndicate the rest. The country club Rolodex, people will call it.
It was, you were doing, or your father, and then you were doing developments that were very vertical, all in on the equity, or vast majority, but now you're starting to do big deals and bring other people in, and the sales and the trust and the deal making from a transition standpoint. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, historically, that's how he raised money. And that had become inefficient. You had REITs that started to proliferate in the kind of early to mid 90s. Institutional capital came into real estate in a very big way. And so to compete, you really needed to have a war chest of dry powder. And so we decided that we would raise private equity funds so that we had kind of blind commingled funds. People would entrust their capital to us, and then we would go to work. And we had unspecified targets, but we had a strategy, and we would sell that strategy to potential investors. The company Intercontinental Real Estate Corp, was kind of born out of that time as an asset management platform. And the first fund we raised was a $10 million fund. We put in about half the capital, and then we raised the balance of it from a handful of Boston business luminaries. Bill Bain, who started Bain Consulting, Mitt Romney, my previous boss from the Bank of Boston, Ira Stepanian, he was the CEO of the Bank of Boston, the former lieutenant governor of Massachusetts, Tip O'Neill's son, Tom O'Neill, invested, and Kevin O'Leary. Yeah, I had met Kevin at a cocktail party, and we kind of hit it off. And we started to play squash together. He was the CEO of the Learning Company at the time, and we'd get together and play squash once a week. And then, the families got to know each other. My kids were about the same age as his kids, and so we were in each other's homes, sometimes going on holiday together. So it really started out as very much a friendship. And that first fund, we did very well with it, and success has a way of building trust in a relationship, and so, and we used that as kind of a launch pad to now starting to open up to institutional capital, and so we raised a series of funds. By the time I left the company in 2006. I sold my interest in the business to my brother. We were about $2 billion assets under management.
Wow.
And that company today, I'm pretty proud of what my brother's done with it. It's $10 billion assets under management. So one of the top real estate asset managers in the U.S.
Yeah. So is that still largely Boston area?
It's Boston, but it's a national portfolio with offices in Chicago, L.A., Texas. I mean, they're everywhere.
So now you're on your own in the late, would we still call them the aughts, the 2000s? Is it still the aughts?
Yeah.
Does anybody know yet? But you'd established some trust with Kevin, done some successful deals with Kevin. Proceed. This is interesting.
Yeah, I had also, I joined the boutique bank that had helped us as a placement agent to raise money, a company called the Trinity Group out of London in the UK. And they were kind of a high-touch.
Did you expat in London?
No.
Okay.
No. I lived in Boston, and then I traveled as and when necessary. They had a specialty. It was 2 Boston expats that had started the bank, and they brought me in as an associate partner, and I helped them bring clients, and I helped them work on various mandates. But they had a specialty of raising money for private equity, best-of-breed private equity funds in Europe, money from Europe and the Middle East. They had been career bankers. One of the co-founders, a gentleman by the name of Ford Fraker, Ford Fraker. He had been the head of J.P. Morgan for the Middle East region, and then he became the president of the Saudi International Bank. And the other co-founder for Bear Stearns had been running around the Middle East for decades. And so they wanted some young blood in there, somebody who kind of knew the culture of the company and knew how to operate. So it was kind of an interesting time. I was traveling a lot in Europe and the Middle East and interacting with family offices and sovereign wealth funds. And it was a way for me. I was a little too young to be retired. We had done well in life, but I was still hungry and competitive and wanted to, stay in the mix. And so, it was a interesting time, and I did that all the way up until a couple of years ago when I joined Kevin.
So, talk a little bit about what your role is in O'Leary Ventures, and then bring us home to North Dakota.
Sure. So I'm the CEO of O'Leary Ventures. Kevin approached me a couple of years ago. He was actually coaching me on a negotiation I was having with somebody else to go run a big fund platform. Okay. As my friend. And then, we were together in Miami in Formula One a couple of years ago, and he said, "Why are you even talking to those guys? My brand has grown to a point where, there's a lot of moving parts. I need to get my arms around it all. How'd you like to come on board and as the CEO of the company and help me move this thing forward?" He has unique access to proprietary deal flow. His celebrity affords him a lot of things. He worked very hard to get to where he got to, and so for me, it was just it was a guy who I had observed to be an incredibly charismatic leader. I was kind of shoulder to shoulder with him and would sometimes attend his corporate events and see the way he led his organization. He had these monthly dinners at the Capitol Grill in Boston, these steak dinners, and he would hold court at those dinners and go around the table and celebrate the successes of everybody at the table. It was nothing but positivity and inspiration, and you could see that he had a superpower in that regard. The people around that table really wanted to perform well for him, and he rewarded them accordingly. And so I knew his character, and so the conversation I had with him was about a 5-minute conversation. I said, "Sign me up. Let's do it." But I did say to him, if we're going to do this, I think we should institutionalize your brand. We should establish an asset management platform. Everything he had always done was with his personal wealth. He had invested in Shark Tank deals with his own money, and then his family office, usually 1 to 3 deals a year, where he would invest with a club of investors, and he had some tremendous, outcomes. And so I thought, wow, here's a guy who's got probably the best critical thinking skills I've ever seen. He's been doing these reps in the Shark Tank. A lot of people see that as entertainment and TV, and but I knew that what he was doing. And if you watch that show, it's you almost get a mini MBA watching that show. These guys are so experienced, but in the course of filming one season of Shark Tank, they'll see over 200 pitches each pitch is about an hour long. And what you see on TV gets edited down to an 8-minute episode with his kind of now iconic quotes.
Yeah, there'll inevitably be a theatrical element in the editing to make it entertaining.
And that's what has everybody, kind of pegging Kevin with a certain kind of a persona. He's a hard ass, or, he's a hard truth-telling guy. Take it out behind the barn and shoot it. You're dead to me. This kind of stuff. But what you don't see is the whole hour that they're there mentoring those entrepreneurs, giving them advice, making suggestions in a pretty profound way that has everybody leaving the tank with a lifetime experience that they'll never forget, and a lot of guidance. So,
and some pretty profound national exposure for their pitch.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, that's not like scripted reality TV in a cynical sort of way. I mean, there inevitably, like I said, a theatrical element of it, but those are legitimate businesses being legitimately pitched with it within the whole process of it, and Kevin made a particular investment in a North Dakota play, right? Isn't that the?
That's right. Yeah, it was the guys from PRX Fitness who are here in Fargo that had come into Shark Tank with a solution for space management. They had a foldable gym equipment. I think they started with one product. The hero product was the bench press that you could kind of pick up and lay flat against the wall. They had, I think, less than $1 million in lifetime sales when they went into the tank. Kevin invested in that company, and then, kind of a confluence of factors, COVID, everybody staying at home, really kind of was an accelerant.
Perfect timing for
it was
an innovative home gym for space and convenience.
Everybody in those times, converted their garages into gyms. They weren't leaving their homes. Yep. The company went to over $50 million a year in sales. They've cooled off a little bit, but they're still going strong. I think, they're doing 35 to 40 million in sales, and had enough cash flow. And given the supply chain constraints that they were facing, they decided to build a manufacturing facility here in Fargo. And so it created a lot of impact. And I think ultimately, Kevin came back to North Dakota to spend time with the company, and the studio decided to film a follow-up in the tank. So they sent him out here to do some ice fishing and create some really great B-roll, and it was a really fun experience for him. He got to know the people, and so, really that was the genesis of North Dakota for O'Leary Ventures. And so when I said to him, let's institutionalize the brand, he had also been approached by some folks in the state who said, would you ever consider doing more in the state? We really liked the exposure that PRX brought. We like your investment acumen, and there's a lot of opportunity here. So he kind of turned to me, and he had a front row seat to watching my brother and I scale our real estate investment management business. And he said, could we do this? And I said, well, I don't know. Let me go out there and check it out.
Had you been to North Dakota before at that point? Oh, that's cool.
I had never been to North Dakota. I just knew about the hockey team at UND. In college, I used to watch them clobber our team, and it was, I think the North Dakota players, I saw them as larger than life. I remember distinctly, they look about a foot taller than all of our players. That was the thing. They grow them big out there.
Scandinavians.
That was it. And so I came and spent some time and met the folks at Commerce. And at the time,
was this in winter, or
no? This was in the summer of 2022.
Okay.
So we started a dialogue in the summer of 2022. I came out, toured a little bit, started learning about the economy. Almost immediately, I was blown away by the diverse economic underpinnings of North Dakota. I think the impression that everybody has is it's oil and gas. And they understand that there's farmland here too, but they don't understand the magnitude of it. Right. And so, you consider the state is 44 million acres, and 39 million of it is ag. And then you quickly come to find out that they're feeding the country and the world with some of their, foodstuffs, and that, oil and gas and the unique geology here kind of lends itself to innovation and the adoption of technology for ag and for sustainability. Everybody thinks of oil and gas states as dirty contributors to the environment because of fossil fuels. But what they don't realize is these guys are also innovating in carbon capture and rare earth mineral extraction and things that are going to be very, very vital to our success in the future and adoption of clean and sustainable methods of generating power, whether it be wind or solar.
In a huge Microsoft campus, it's really the center of electronics hardware for precision agriculture. We have a growing sort of pharma presence with plasmid manufacturing, and there's definitely a lot going on. So you had conversations with this was sort of mid to post COVID, and you're talking to Commerce, and what came from those conversations?
Well, Commerce had been granted money by the Department of Treasury under what was called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. And small business is very much on brand for Kevin and what he had been doing for 15 seasons of Shark Tank at the time. Now we're on the 17th season, 16th or 17th season. Wow. Yeah. It's a true phenomenon.
Almost as big as The Simpsons and South Park at this point.
I don't want to digress too much, but it's a true phenomenon. It's the #1 watch show, parent and child, in prime time on the weekend.
Okay, cool.
Which is incredible.
Yeah,
because
what other parent and child shows? I mean, that's really interesting.
Yeah, on the night an episode will air, 2 million people will see it. It immediately goes into syndication on CNBC and Hulu. And over the course of a year, if you're a company that goes on Shark Tank, 10 million people will see that show. Wow. And in a lifetime, it's something like 100 million. So what that turned out to be was a tremendous customer acquisition engine for companies. There's a Shark Tank effect that if you go on the show, you get a 70 or 80% spike in sales immediately out of the tank. People start searching, and with direct-to-consumer and website and e-commerce,
they see us as seen on Shark Tank on the packaging at the store too.
Right, and then each one of these sharks then have become networks of their own. Kevin has close to 10 million followers through social media, and so that can be leveraged to tell the story of companies that he invests in. It can be leveraged to tell the story of the state in which he's focusing his investments in. And we tried to do this. We had a vision that what we could do is establish our venture capital and private equity platform, scale it authentically in the state by engaging directly and having boots on the ground and making sure we did a lot of listening and learning, form a business thesis, and effectively achieve favorable returns if we stayed committed and focused. And so it started with an idea, and then it led to us competing in an RFP for these treasury dollars that had been granted to the state. A lot of restrictions on how that money is invested, which makes it difficult at the end of the day. People question, is it economic impact that you're doing? Is it, economic development, or are you return driven? Well, I'm here to tell you we are 100% return driven, but we know if we do a good job, it's going to have a tremendous economic development and impact effect throughout the state. And so, I started coming here and then getting on the road, and I've been everywhere from Belfield to Devil's Lake to Velva, Jamestown, Minot.
I won't ask you what your favorite German sausages yet. Maybe off the air because that's a controversial topic in North Dakota. Given is it Strasburg or Eureka, South Dakota, or Ashley or Wishick, or it's Wishick, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
It's the best sausage. Anyway, so now you go from never having been in North Dakota to coming here on a regular basis. You won the RFP.
We did.
So you have how much to invest over what kind of time frame, and what's sort of what is the, roughly speaking, the constraints of that investment? What are your defined objectives, and then so what are you and others doing in the execution of that?
Okay, in many ways, so it's a 10-year fund. It's $45 million that we have no limitation on how quickly we have to put out the money, but as a practical matter, generally a private equity fund or a venture fund, you'll have a 3-year investment period, and then you'll spend the next 3 or 4 years trying to support and help those companies achieve success, and then you might have a harvest period from years 7 to 10.
Sure.
In this case, we're not focused on harvesting these assets because the fund requires us, as we have exits in the portfolio, to redeploy the capital. Thus far, we've been at it a little over a year. I think we closed the fund at the end of January 2023. We started investing. We've put out $15 million, and we've got about $15 million in the pipeline. So I think before the end of the third quarter, we will have invested $30 million, and by the end of Q1 2025, we'll be fully invested. And then Kevin will start to go to work on helping tell the story of these companies. It depends where they are in their life cycle and genesis. You want to have a company that has commercial success, has a minimum viable product, commercial success, is generating revenues, and that's where we can leverage his TV platform as an accelerant by creating awareness and telling the founder story and the company story and what it's doing, and start to attract eyeballs to that business that we think will help ultimately in its growth and success.
So does each one of your investments need to have a North Dakota connection? I mean, what's the requirement there?
The requirement is 90% North Dakota, 10% non-North Dakota.
Okay.
As a practical matter, we're a North Dakota pure play. Everything we're looking at and everything we're considering, it's always with a lens towards impact in North Dakota.
What constitutes North Dakota, though? Obviously, if it's a North Dakota headquartered company and all the employees are in North Dakota, but if it's can it be North Dakota adjacent? I mean, what is?
It can be North Dakota adjacent. So we're bringing companies that might be headquartered somewhere else, but we're almost as a marketing arm for the state, trying to explain to them all the resources that are here and why they should move their business either completely or in part. You mentioned the various sectors that the state thrives in, but it's ag, it's energy, it's manufacturing, and that's almost ubiquitously applicable in a time when people are starting to look at the supply chain and think about bringing their supply chain,
all the onshoring and friendshoring,
all that stuff. And I think North Dakota is perfectly suited to benefit from that trend. And engineers that might cost $150,000 or $200,000 a year in California or in Texas even are a lower cost alternative here because the cost of living is so attractive in North Dakota. So when companies are evaluating the business opportunity of hiring within the state or looking to the universities that are generating incredible talent. There's been this historic trend of very talented people leaving the state. And then they almost invariably end up coming back because they figure out pretty quickly or over the course of their life that, the culture and the values that they really care about.
Often when they have children, the children start growing up. And you start.
This is a place you want to raise a family.
Absolutely. So you're traveling all over North Dakota. Now you said you met Kevin at a cocktail party, presumably in Boston. So I love that term, cocktail party. It's very 70s. It's in my vocabulary too. So I'm resonating with the comment. So now you're at a cocktail party next week in Boston, and you're talking about North Dakota, and somebody says, North Dakota, why would I want to invest there? I mean, by now, I've certainly heard. So if you're living under a rock, maybe you haven't seen Kevin cheerleading for North Dakota, but maybe the language is a little bit different when you're talking to a potential investor on the coast. But how does that narrative go? Of why North Dakota? And don't sugarcoat it. Like what's the rub? What's the challenge associated with it? And
well, I think before I talk about the challenges, you have to talk about the benefits and the attraction. With any business, you need people, and you need policy that are going to support the companies. And this state's politics seem to have their house in order. Because of its size in terms of the population and everything. It's one big small town. Right. So when you come to North Dakota, you can see everybody, and you're only 1 or 2 degrees removed from anybody. There's a lot of people in the private sector related to people in the public sector, and if you want to come here and see leadership, you can see them. You can get things done. There's an efficiency and productivity. But I think, underneath the surface of all of that, it's the culture of the people. Ultimately, the culture. I mean, we've gotten to a point in our lives where we can pretty much do what we want. We've had success. And so, we're not going to spend time in a place that isn't, pure joy to do so. And I would say, first and foremost, it's the hospitality, it's the kindness of the people. And then, you kind of go a few layers down from that. There is a culture of hard work and discipline and integrity that, sadly, I think is largely being lost in other parts of the country, but it's been very much preserved here. And so that's a big attraction. You want to know that if you're going to establish a business here, that people are going to be committed to the goals and mission of that company. And this is a place where you can find those people. And so that's very comforting and encouraging when you start to invest capital and put it to work. Woke is what they do here at 5 a.m. I heard somebody else say that,
It was Doug's opening line.
Yeah. It was a good one. And look at him as a governor, a guy who literally bet the farm to start a software business. And next thing you know, it's Microsoft's second largest campus, I think, after Redmond, and a lot of jobs. And there's a lot of talent that have supported that company. And that ties in with, the kind of technology innovation that has accompanied the ag presence here, the oil and gas and energy sector. You mentioned biosciences. Very few people know. So when I'm having that conversation with people, it starts with, you have to come to North Dakota and see what's going on. And in 3 days, I'll introduce you to folks at Commerce and the Economic Development Committee and City Council. You'll meet mayors, and you'll come out and see all that's going on. And then you decide, is this a place you want to be? I just went through this in the last couple of days. There's a drone company that's quickly winning contracts with the Department of Defense from Huntsville, Alabama. and they approached us for an investment. And I said, we'd consider it, but you need to be in North Dakota to unlock our capital, and you should come. And they said, well, what's going on in North Dakota? I said, well, first of all, it's the mecca for drone innovation and testing. And the state has built an operating system that in lockstep with the FAA for safe skies that nobody fully appreciates. And if you come here and you see that, I think you'll want to be here. And that's what happened. The company came. We just spent a couple of days in Grand Forks doing demos. We got the business community. We brought folks who are technical experts to help evaluate the company. I'm drawing on the community for advice and guidance on the quality of a potential target investment. And those resources are readily available. I sent 2 Grand Forks guys down to Huntsville to first do a technical DD for us. They came back with a report that was world-class. I couldn't have hired a guy in Boston to evaluate a drone company. All of that talent is here already. And so that's just one small example. I think the opportunities here are endless. The only limitation, the only criticism I have of the state is, A, it doesn't tell its story very well, and that's okay, because I respect the humility. And if you can handle the exposure, we'll tell that story, and we'll leverage Kevin's platform to do that. And also workforce retention is an issue. So we're not just investing, we're also doing outreach at the universities. We partnered with NDSU as a mentor for companies that are grown out of the FARMS program, whereby they won a National Science Foundation grant, and will be standing on the ready as companies grow out of that to kind of give them that financial advice, the support, and mentorship that hopefully they need. We partnered with the venture groups, the student-led venture groups, Pathway Ventures at NDSU, and also Dakota Ventures, which was the first student-led venture fund in the United States. I don't think people really understand that. We have an intern from Dakota Ventures for the summer now.
Met him.
And so we think that's important because we're kind of leveraging Kevin's, obviously his celebrity, but also his business acumen, and we're going out to the universities and we're encouraging those kids to stay and start a business or join a business that's in the state, raise their families here. So we're kind of, and then we're traveling the state and getting out to the western part, the middle section, the eastern part. A lot of people will come here and just default to the eastern part of the state and Fargo because there's such a great ecosystem of kind of startup activity that's happening here. And a lot of the resources are right here. But ultimately, I think to be effective and to be the bridge to unlocking the state's potential, you have to be everywhere.
Absolutely.
And you have to have boots on the ground. You have to be omnipresent. And you need to really kind of stick to your guns so that you are able to effectively manage in a way that benefits the whole state, not just part of the state.
So I think that give you a chance to drink some water and I'll rant a little bit. We don't appreciate in North Dakota, what we have. The 1 degree of separation. You use first names for most everybody. That we're still a personal reputation based network, and if you work hard, you have a good say-do ratio. You be somebody that can be counted on. You follow through. You never lie, and you be useful. Just that, and you continue to do that. You can build out a network such that you can talk to anyone. It doesn't mean they'll agree with whatever it is that you may or may not be proposing, because we're all humans. But we have access to all of our institutions and all of our leaders. We're not big enough to form like permanent camps. We don't have, while there's the political polarization that's affecting the West writ large, and certainly the U.S. We're not immune to that by any means. But at the end of the day, we're just not big enough to make camps along those lines. And so whether it's our legislators or just who you're collaborating with, those political issues, those ideological issues, for the most part within the state, they're just not present, and it's not a thing that we want to get in the way of what we're trying to do, because it's just us. I mean, we all. It feels like we all know each other, and the reality is it's damn close to that. And people don't understand. Like, go to California and try to do something that's entrepreneurial, try to make a deal, try to create something, and just try to get access to your commerce department, to try to get access to your legislatures, especially if you're new. It's just the larger states. Have so many barriers and so much friction, but they have critical mass. So, many of the states have a wonderful critical mass for talent and for money, but a lot in the workforce issues are everywhere now. There seems to be constraints on a lot of these very successful business areas, and people are starting to look at where the opportunities are. People are starting to look at North Dakota, and to me, it's critical that within North Dakota we really understand, what we have, and how to make the most of it. And we are, as they say, North Dakota nice, whatever that really means. But we don't cheerlead ourselves. You don't drive the nicest vehicle. If you come into wealth. And your neighbor says that's an awfully nice truck. You don't say, "Yep, I paid cash. It's got all these features." You say, "Well, it's set me back, but it's real reliable." And I just really needed to haul the trailer, so I needed the bigger engine. It's working pretty good for him. You whether it's in a smaller town in North Dakota right now, or it's just in our legacy. It's really in our culture of there's an egalitarian ethos, and there is a don't sing your praises, and that's good and bad. It is it's certainly good from a humility and from a just a moral compass, but our ability to really tell our story is hampered by that. So having outside voices who are really committed and on the ground and earning trust at the working level, be able to tell our story is awesome, and I thank you guys for that. And I encourage anybody listening to think intentionally on these things and how are we telling our story. But the investments you're talking about, that's been branded the Wonder Fund, but that's not the only opportunity you see in North Dakota. I definitely want to talk about data centers, but broadly speaking, when you look at North Dakota as an opportunity, what are the things that the O'Leary Ventures is contemplating or working on or pitching beyond the Wonder Fund?
Well, first, before I get into that, the culture that you just described, that is the attraction. So I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, the world we live in today, media-driven, social media-driven, whether you like it or whether you don't, it's a part of the fabric of how people communicate. And there's a certain benefit to that because you can communicate directly to your constituents. You don't have to go through an intermediary now with social media. So if used properly, the state can keep doing what the state is doing, and people are going to come here and they're going to find it because there's too much that's good that's been lost elsewhere. That is still preserved here, kind of at the core. And, people, people are very rooted in their faith here as well, I've noticed. And to me, that's an attraction. I wouldn't be here if I didn't kind of experience the kind of humility and these kind of lost virtues of Americana that you find here in North Dakota.
And you're kind of you are a unique guest to this new podcast in that you're the only guest that was involved in early conversations before we had a studio and the gear and committed to this. I talked to you and my partner in crime, Patrick McCloskey, we talked well over a year ago, several different times about what we were trying to do and how it's culturally driven and how we're trying to drive discourse regionally that we've lost. We've lost when the service clubs, a lot of the service clubs, your Elks and your Kiwanis and Rotaries. I mean, they still exist, but a lot of them are, frankly, aging out, and social media is sort of replacing that, but it's not replacing very important elements of it. And so, how can we use this tech, the social media tech, and these platforms? How can we use it to drive, kind of trying to save time? I mean, these conversations about what's the right thing for North Dakota, how do we preserve what really needs to be preserved? How do we revivify some things that maybe have been eroded? How do we leverage all of our opportunities? All those conversations are happening many different places, but can we scale it by things like this podcast that can have a faster reach? Because some of these opportunities are temporal in nature, and one example would be data centers, and the there's an urgency sort of there's a kind of gold rush underway on data. The data is the new oil is a term, and it seems like I'm pivoting here, but data centers are interesting in the age of something like ChatGPT, because literally it's a giant building. You put energy in, and you get productivity out, kind of. I mean, it's converting energy into information, but that information is being put to work as a productivity tool. And there is a massive investment worldwide happening. The capex of the big hyperscalers, so your big cloud providers, they are more than double the capex investment of the big petroleum companies. The build out on data centers it's
massive. And to give your listeners some context, the worldwide demand for AI compute data centers today is 100 gigawatts, and there's only 8 gigawatts of 8 gigawatts of total supply. And what everybody just woke up to with the war in Ukraine is that we might want to think about onshoring our data, because we've had data centers, historically all over the world. And the requirements for these data centers are fundamentally different from the last generation of data centers. For a modern day AI compute data center, you need 4 things. You need power, you need ping, you need people, and you need great policy. And a lot of the grid is capacity constrained around the country. North Dakota is one state that has grid capacity. And where you might want to add grid capacity, you can get that done too. You can create behind the meter power generation, and then you can power your industrial project or AI data center, and you can be selling power back to the grid and play a part in improving the infrastructure, here and nationally. So that's just something that, to me, has to be done. And the country better wake up to the fact that, whether it's micronuclear power plants and things that historically have been somewhat controversial, we need to diversify energy and power and improve, because it's a national security issue first and foremost. But then also, if we're going to compete on the global stage with AI compute, we need to have those data centers here. And North Dakota is a state that I think is perfectly suited for that. You've got flat land, you've got lots of it, you've got a great power infrastructure. The state, for over 20 years now has had one of the better fiber infrastructures, and it's got great policy. The one limitation is the people, but you do have a talent pool coming out of the university cohort, and each one of these data centers creates high-paying jobs. There's approximately an 8-to-1 impact on the investment that goes into a data center. So, I'm getting in the weeds here a little bit, but rough order of magnitude. So you described hyperscalers and the demand today, and I gave you a little bit of macro context for that. But the hyperscalers that are out there today, whether it's Microsoft, Tesla, Google, Meta, SAP, Oracle, their minimum requirement is 100 megawatts. They're not going to go start with a 20 or a 30 megawatt data center if they don't know that over time that power can be delivered to them to grow and scale to a minimum of 100. But all of them have much higher requirements for where they want to get to.
The data centers, from a high density compute, from an AI standpoint, I mean, they're getting to the point where a single, say, refrigerator-sized piece can have 100 megawatts, 100 kilowatts in it. I mean, the amount of power that's able to be focused on compute from a space standpoint is just unbelievable. The challenge is you got to get the heat out, and one of the things North Dakota has in abundance is cold. So it's not a trivial thing. It's certainly not everything, but it's not a trivial thing that if you have a data center in Arizona or you have a data center in North Dakota, all other things being equal, the thermal management is of all of your compute is easier in North Dakota. So we have a friendly climate environment. We have a great regulatory environment. We have access to all of our institutions to be able to drive change. We have a friendly, say, financial environment. We're actually the only state that has a bank. The Bank of North Dakota is a big deal, and it's a huge advantage to us in the state. And we've used it strategically to mitigate what otherwise would be extractive businesses. So how do we maintain the value add portion, the stuff that you make a lot of money on, whether it's making sure that the processing of crops is happening here, or the value add coming from petroleum products. How do we get more of those value add activities, which tend to be the things that make the most money? How do we get more of them in the state? And to me, we have ample energy. One of the other things is like earthquakes are a big deal for data centers. You don't want them. We actually don't have that many tornadoes. We certainly never have hurricanes, and those are big deals for the reliability that's needed for data centers. One of the things that many of us within the state have been advocating and having whatever conversations that we can, so I'm having one now, is there's a real opportunity here, not just for outside investment to bring some jobs and to get some income from power. There's a real opportunity here for North Dakota to be strategic about the value of compute, about data being the new oil, and we do have every state has its advantages and disadvantages, and North Dakota has some unique advantages for attracting data centers. And if we have the right synergistic mindset, we might be able to carve out a good deal on some dedicated compute for the state that could be cost effective. That's something that myself and others have been trying to get the word out to people for people to understand this opportunity. So if a 100 megawatt data center comes in, that might grow to 250 megawatts or whatever. I mean, this is just massive, and they have the scale to bring in GPUs. So for people that are using so back up a little bit here. So people that are using something like GPT-4 on a regular basis. The future, nobody really knows what the future is on all these things, but something that seems pretty self-evident, just based on the utility of something like ChatGPT, is an organization, a large organization like a large healthcare organization or a university or even a state government or any big business that's been around a while, and you have thousands or millions of documents. You have all sorts of data. You have all sorts of structured data. It's not on the web. It's not scrapable, so ChatGPT did not train on it. ChatGPT trained on publicly available, for the most part, data sets, and so it can talk like a human and sort of understand inferences, but it doesn't know anything about your business. And so it's kind of like an entry-level employee, sort of, in that it has domain knowledge about how to function in society, and you can talk to it and have it sort of do things, but it knows absolutely really nothing of practical value to what's inside your organization. And the reason this matters and why data centers matters and why this is a critical time right now to be talking about this in North Dakota is it sure looks like we're going to be having organizations, companies, private and public organizations having their own trained AIs. And that's not, you don't take all of your in-house documents and dump them into the prompt of a ChatGPT. It can't handle that. But what you can do is take a large language model and make it bigger, and you train it on your data, and you lock down the data that is trained to basically know English and that sort of thing. So you can end up with a custom trained.
No question, and you just said it. Data is the new oil. And we're tremendously undersupplied now. And I think the next generation of what you're describing, it's a phenomenal tool as it currently sits, but tools are being created that will radically and fundamentally change the way business is done. And, I think the only competitive advantage in business today is not if you're willing to change, but the rate at which you change.
Right.
You have to be open to innovation and adopting these tools as they're coming down the pike, because there's going to be companies of one that are using just AI compute that will compete with your business. Now, I don't see AI compute as a threat to replacing people. Okay, that would be a terrible outcome. But you have to, as a business owner today, look for ways to improve, innovate, change by adopting these tools. So what you just described, I think, is spot on. It's going to happen, and it should happen here, because what you have here at its foundation with ag and then value-added ag and then technology, this is essentially the R&D lab for the world for agriculture. It should also be the R&D lab for innovation with the use of AI in energy and energy tech, and then also in manufacturing and in biosciences and in defense tech. And people don't fully understand about North Dakota. It's not just drones, it's also Space Force. It's endless, the opportunity in this relatively small state, which means that it's going to be very efficient to get things done, to try new things, to implement those changes. So at its core, you want the infrastructure to support all that. The other big thing going for the state is the nat gas. Right now, we're flaring a lot of nat gas. It limits how much oil can be extracted. That nat gas should be used for new power generating facilities and new industrial projects that marshal in the next wave of innovation that becomes a power of example for the whole country. And beneath that are the people. And so if we can play a tiny part in fueling that growth and that shift, I'll be tremendously proud. And it will be a power of example culturally for the rest of the state. Once people start seeing this, then maybe they'll knock it off. All the shenanigans that are going on, in cities and in the coastal areas right now, it's terribly saddening what's happening. But we seem relatively insulated from all of that. One of the things you've got going for it is, people who like to riot and become activists generally don't come to places where it's 20 below zero in the winter to complain.
Everybody that grows up here has to say, Grandma used to say that keeps the riffraff out. That's the term, the riffraff.
But these AI data centers, as I mentioned, they need. The specs are very difficult to achieve, and you can't just go anywhere and build an AI data center. So you need all of those things. The fiber optic backbone that the state has means that you can have extremely low latency. The hyperscalers themselves have what's called a 5 nines requirement. You have to be up and operating with no downtime 99.999% of the time, which means you can only be down 26 seconds a month. And so you have to have backup, you have to have redundancy everywhere. You have to have backup power generation. And there's a lot of states that won't allow you to have a diesel backup generator. Now that diesel backup generator almost never works, but all of a sudden you need that. And if you're in a state where the policy is such that it's death to diesel and fossil fuels, guess what? They're not going to play a part in the next wave of innovation in this country. North Dakota, you can do it. Throughout the heartland, you can do it. These other states too, Oklahoma and Montana, they should be big players. We know already that Google's lowest cost to operate data center in the world is in Pryor, Oklahoma. And all of these hyperscalers are looking at the heartland as a potential opportunity. But there's very few people who can kind of execute because the amount of capital required is tremendous. One 100 megawatt data center to build the building, core, and shell with all of that redundancy I described is $10 million per megawatt. That's $1 billion before your tenants even come in and spend.
Or you have a computer in there at all.
Before you even have a computer in there. So then the hyperscaler comes in and they spend $26 million per megawatt. So one 100 megawatt data center, $3.6 billion. Now, those computers and racks that they put in, historically, their life cycle was 3 or 4 years. So you're re-spending that $26 million per megawatt. It might not be dollar for dollar, but it's
like $1 billion a year.
It's a tremendous amount every 4 years. But guess what? NVIDIA just announced that their cycle of new chip innovation is going to be almost annually. It's going to be like 12 to 18 months. So that spend is going to happen over and over and over again at each one of these data centers, and the impact of that. Now you're generating generally, let's say 200 jobs to build the facility, and then permanently employed high-skilled labor is about 150 people, and all of those people buy homes, buy cars. They go to the dry cleaner, they eat in the restaurants, so when you think about, the impact that could have on the state and the potential for foreign capital, because there's no way to do this with purely U.S. capital resources. You have to embrace partnerships as long as it's American-led, American-made, and that capital comes in without a lot of power and influence, but more as a passive investor in these projects. I'm all for it. And you're going to have to look, outside the U.S. Right now, there's a lot of U.S. private equity firms that have allocated to AI compute data centers. But if you look at the amounts of dollars they've allocated, they might build 3 data centers with the money that they're going to invest. It's woefully short. And if you are willing and open to partner with outside capital sources from not just in the state does not have all the money it needs to build all the industrial projects that should be built here, to bring AI compute data centers to the state that would ultimately represent an offtake for the natural gas that would dramatically increase oil extraction and therefore oil extraction taxes that the state would collect to fund its budget and to build its coffers in the sovereign wealth fund or the legacy fund that you described. All of that has to happen. And so we're not just here managing a $45 million venture fund. We're thinking much bigger picture. We're here for 10 years managing this fund. What else can we do that will have a real material and dramatic impact on the state's success over the next several decades? That's how we're thinking about it.
One of the things I think I would really like it if everybody could realize on data centers is it's going to happen. I mean, the 100 gigawatts. I mean, there's some numbers that it's like from just a pure build out standpoint. Who the hell knows how that's what the pace of that is? But what's inevitably for sure going to happen is we're going to be leveraging AI, and every company, every organization is going to want to have what's unique in the information for their organization, AI enabled. And so there's going to be a huge demand for custom trained models. And do we want that money to leave the state? I mean,
Well, not only do we not want it to leave the state, but we want that innovation to support all the companies that are already in the state.
And if we had data centers, and if we could structure some deals so that some of that AI compute could be strategically leveraged for the benefit of the state. You think of it like we have like the LIFT Fund, and we have the Wonder Fund, we have the Bank of North Dakota. We have these resources where sort of as a state, we're trying to help our own businesses. We're trying to help our own state, and we think of that often just in terms of dollars. We should start thinking about that also in terms of the ability to compute, which translates to watts, because it ultimately it's an energy thing. But if we're smart as a state, we could have startups, we could have our existing industry, we could have our university researchers, we could have our government organizations have a kind of, if we structure it right, preferential access to AI compute for training our AI models well ahead of other people. And from an entrepreneurial boost, we would have people actually come to North Dakota. Hey, you want to do an AI play? We've got some compute actually for you because we worked it into the deal for the data centers that we're attracting. It's a missed opportunity if we don't do this.
And the state should think about it like this. The two things that you need to unlock the capital, the investment dollars that are on the sideline poised to invest in these AI data centers, is you need tax incentives and you need a long-term power contract. Mm-hmm. Because the hyperscalers ultimately who bear the burden of the cost to operate these things are looking at those two numbers. The investors are looking for a mid-teens type return. Now, if you have a high cost of power and you're paying sales tax, not just once, but every 3 to 4 years, but now it's becoming every 18 months, then you end up with a single-digit return. And the opportunity cost of deploying that money for a single-digit return doesn't make it make sense. So you need to partner with states who are willing to put an incentive package in place. What the state should do is they should make a condition of those incentive packages that those data centers allocate a portion of them to in-state companies and goals for using that for their own benefit. And I don't see why that couldn't be achieved. Right. That's just good business. That makes a lot of sense. And if the state wants to take advantage, and it starts with the universities, and it kind of goes beyond that, that's how they should think about it, in my opinion.
I totally agree. It is an opportunity that if we move on it quickly, could be an accelerant to very high-paying jobs in the state to turning this state into a basin of attraction for tech companies. And that comes back to, we're a place that you want to raise a family at, and cities are no longer. It depends, and I don't want to disparage beautiful cities with beautiful neighborhoods, but the trends are horrifying in terms of cultural decay, and whether it's crime or just cultural fraying and polarization. We're a functional state where people get along, where sort of your word is your deed. If you have integrity and you put in the work and you be useful, we like you, and we want you to stick around and raise a family here. And if you understand how critically important it is to build a community with children and grandchildren in mind at the forefront, and that from a investment standpoint, the ultimate return is the flourishing of the next generations. We still have that mindset here, and if we can do some interesting, very practical, strategic things, like, hey, let's attract some data centers here aggressively, but let's negotiate the deal where some of that compute goes directly to the strategic benefit of the state. The potential upside of that is hard to quantify. Nobody knows where all of this AI is going to go, and we're terrible about actually predicting the future. We're having a weird conversation because it's like, remember when they used to call it the information superhighway, and the late '80s conversations about what the internet would become, and when people tried to describe it in detail, we were always wrong. So we really don't know exactly what this high density compute opportunity what big data and AI, how they're going to manifest at a detail level. But it is patently obvious that it is going to change things potentially on the scale of what the internet did, and we really are in the catbird seat in this state if we're not stupid. If we're really smart.
The state is absolutely in the catbird seat. You just touched on the unrest and chaos that exists throughout the country in various pockets. It tends to be urban areas. We could start that conversation. We'll be here all day. It's very disheartening. And I think that the unintended consequence of the pendulum swinging the way it has is that the right people are finding each other. Mm-hmm. And North Dakota are the right people. North Dakotans are the right people, And I wouldn't be here doing business if I didn't feel joy and comfort in doing it, That doesn't mean we don't have problems in trying to get things done, every day. And that'll come back to my competitive roots. We just face and overcome those challenges. Something isn't going your way, you got to find a way and adopt an attitude. Kind of cultivate an attitude of yes, we'll get there and we'll figure it out. And I'll say, and you may want to edit this out later, that all the right people have the guns.
We're keeping that. So I tell people often in terms of politics, I'll consider voting for you as long as you trust me with my guns. That's my first litmus test. How much agency do you trust me with? And obviously with that is rights are responsibilities, and we've kind of, we've lost our minds of this indulgence of this term right as a thing that's independent of responsibilities. But fundamentally, something like free speech, the Second Amendment, those things, they only work when they're actually manifests as not only is this your right, it's also your responsibility. The free speech is your right. It's your responsibility to tell the truth.
Well, the vast majority of this country is what I would describe as a classic liberal. Free speech, gun rights. We don't want to get in other people's business.
A classical liberal. But
Yeah, exactly.
Classically.
Exactly. And now somehow that's been distorted. And those people who in the 1970s would have been considered in the middle or a little bit right of center because of their desire for fiscal responsibility. So they're a conservative, but they're kind of a moderate. That's right wing today, which is kind of insane to me.
Everybody's right wing now.
This seems like a good pausing point. A question that I would love to toss in, if for consideration, is there's been plenty of statements about how North Dakota is the right place. The people are the right people. You told him, the dynamics, the values, the wanting to raise a family here. That is so much of the appeal. My curiosity as a newer transplant to the area, I lived in Orlando and I lived in Salt Lake City, both while they were listed as the best cities to move to. And there was no plan to welcome that many new families. And it created a really unpleasant experience for everybody that lived there previously and that people who were moving in. So what are the challenges? What are the things that need to be done between now and whenever as all of these things grow rapidly? How do we avoid the horrific growing pains of adolescence for places like North Dakota or the towns around them?
We'll see if that mic picked that up, but I'll repeat it just in case. So what Patrick, our producer, just asked was, if we're going to attract a lot of people for these opportunities, how do we sort of scale the influx in a way that works? Is that fair?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I would say is, let's first start not digging the hole, so to speak, which is, there's a demographic issue across the entire Western world as well as developed, the whole developed world. I mean, South Korea is unbelievable what the demographic issue, but at a practical level in North Dakota, we have immediate workforce challenges, and a greater influx of people moves to solve the workforce challenge, and then creates housing challenges, and it creates school challenges. So it's mixed. How do we get to where we could really scale? I mean, how could we get, if we had to add another, say, if 100,000 more people had to come into the Fargo metro area over a decade, that would that would be a high-class problem from managing that. I mean, do you have any thoughts about?
The building blocks are there because because of the state-owned bank, you have a tremendous mortgage program for home buyers and first-time home buyers. The state bank is able to credit enhance and lower the cost of living for people who want to live here. But we need housing. The growth that I think is inevitable, because two things will drive that growth. We've talked about it a little bit. One is, and we didn't talk about it, is the hybrid work style. Right now, you can grow up in North Dakota and you can go to work for a global business, but you can stay here and live here. And so that's going to drive demand in housing. And then the question is, well, what's the cost of living? Well, you have a competitive advantage in the cost of living here. You can get a great house for $250,000, where the average is $800,000 to $1 million in some of these urban areas, just for a starter house. I mean, it's total insanity. And then with interest rates, mortgage prices at 8% instead of 3.5%, where they were just a few years ago, it's cost prohibitive. And so I'm terribly concerned about how that housing crisis is gonna play out in the long term. But North Dakota seems very well poised for population growth. As soon as people wake up to the fact that they can live here and have a very good living and quality of life and own a home, then they'll start turning their attention here. But it goes back to the infrastructure of what is the grid capacity and how much housing is here. Grand Forks is facing the same thing. Grand Forks, with all of the things that are happening in the defense context, they need more housing there. We need more housing here in Fargo. So ultimately, and you have a very good cadre of homegrown builders and developers here. I recently met with the Roar construction family. I mean, you're talking about a highly skilled developer. It's companies locally, and then it's also going to be national scale companies that start to pay attention that will help with that. I think it's inevitable, but if you want it to happen in kind of a smooth and timely way that would facilitate that increase in workforce, then you're going to need kind of everybody working kind of hand in glove. And then that goes back to what we talked about earlier. You can get things done here. You can get permits. If I was trying to permit a residential project in Boston today, man, I can't even describe to you what would happen. You've got to go in front of the city council. You've got all these zoning restrictions.
And some of the large road projects in Boston are notorious.
Yes.
For being barrels full of money burning.
Yes.
Seems to be.
Yes.
Seemingly.
That the rest of the country pays for.
Yep.
And then,
that's right.
and then you've got neighborhood groups that will come in and, let their voices be heard. And to permit a project in Boston, it may take 24 months. Yep. Here it's 6.
Yep.
Okay. So you've got that going for you. Then you've got highly skilled local investors and developers. But there's some capital constraints there. You're going to have to embrace outside capital. You want the big companies like the related companies that have developed projects all over the country to start to look at North Dakota and help support with housing development and infrastructure as well. So, ultimately, again, you asked what's wrong with North Dakota. I think everything that's wrong with North Dakota is what's right about North Dakota. There is nothing wrong with the state, but there's somewhat of a healthy skepticism about folks like O'Leary Ventures and others. What are they doing here?
Yep.
What's their angle?
Who's that Shark Tank guy?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. He's here because he loves it, and he loves what he's doing. And, Kevin could go sit on a beach and live out his life and be very happy doing it. Yep. But this guy is inspired, he's energized, and he's fallen in love with the people of North Dakota, and he wants to be here. Others will do the same. And so there has to be, it's like what Ronald Reagan once said, trust but verify. Here it's a little bit of, there's not a lot of trust, and you have to, and that skepticism sometimes can be an impediment to progress. I think we've done a decent job, but there has to be a persistence and a commitment, and towards consistency, so that we keep essentially being impeccable with our words, and that's what we're trying to do, and others should. But I would encourage people of the state of North Dakota to be open to change, embrace change. That means all of the things we've been talking about with innovation and data centers and industrial projects and improving the manufacturing base here, because this state should be that shining example for the rest of the country. And it should be the R&D facility to a wave of innovation such that the country has never seen. But then also be open to change in the form of folks coming from other places here. And so far, the reception has been incredible. And so I feel welcome. I feel a sense of community that frankly I lost. I remember growing up in a time when nobody locked their doors and it was the screen door and we'd all run to each other's houses and stuff like that. You know, North Dakota still has that, and I think it should preserve it. But, you know, part of that is you know, being open to the, you know, the migration that is, you know, there's going to be a lot of shifts in the population around the country over the next 20 years. I mean, it's already starting to happen. You know, the most notable is everybody moving from New York to Nashville or Austin or Florida, people moving from California to Nevada. You know, you're seeing a lot of that, but that's going to start to infill. Yeah. And then my question is, what is the state going to do?
How do we manage it? How do we maintain what's great about North Dakota while managing that inflow? Those are policy questions, but that's also a question that everybody needs to think about. How do we maintain a vibrant, cohesive, coherent, confident culture, our value system? How do we do that in a way that integrates? You know, how do we bring people in here, and whether they're moving from whether they're moving from California, which is a somewhat of a anyway, or they're coming from or they're new Americans. What you know I advocate is be confident in who we are. I mean, that people are integrating into a new culture. You know, you raise your kids, you try to get your kids to have exactly your maybe you know your value framework and your way of seeing things, and then they go and become adolescents and they get exposed to their larger peer group, and that becomes the dominant influencer. And as long as that broader cultural influence is coherent and confident, the United States is proof that you can have tremendous influx and still have until arguably recently a fairly coherent united identity and a kind of patriotic pride. As North Dakotans, I think we need to look at people coming in here as part of economic opportunity and perhaps to some extent like leaving areas that are now becoming disadvantageous. How are we going to act? What is our? How are we overtly demonstrating what our culture is, so that it's clear when people are coming on board? You are welcome. Please come to the table. Here's some bread. Have your children come to our schools.
Well, that's here. You know, so you know the sense of community and the warmth and hospitality is fundamental to how the people are here. And also the geography in combination with that makes for a very interesting natural filter. I don't think that North Dakotans need to be braced for impact, that there's going to be a wave of undesirables coming to the state. You know, the right people are finding each other right now. And so I think the task at hand is to be a little bit more North Dakota proud on top of North Dakota nice. Right. You know, we don't have to give up our humility in letting the world know what's so great about this state. And now we have tech-enabled methods of storytelling that will facilitate that. The conversation we're having right now, what Kevin O'Leary is able to do on national and international TV, how we're able to be a bridge and start to tell the North Dakota story in places like New York and Boston and these places where, you know, a lot of our peers and contemporaries are looking for opportunity where they can effectively put capital to work. Historically, the heartland has been a private equity desert. So what's happened is you have this very provincial private class of investors that have benefited tremendously, but that have limited the execution of really building out the opportunity set that exists in all these states. So I think kind of a very organic shift will take place, and the state should be open and receptive to change. ultimately. And it's not always easy, because it's human nature to be a little bit set in our ways. But the change is coming. I think the state is doing a good job. Infrastructure, housing, these are things that need to be addressed within the state. The state has the right tools in place, because I can buy a home today and I can apply for a little bit of credit enhancement, and I can have a low cost of living. That's very attractive.
So you said North Dakota nice. We have that. And North Dakota proud. We need to find what that voice is. It's not going to be showboating, but it needs to be, we need to be on message with who we are, and we need to not be too pathologically humble, maybe. It's good. Let's keep our humility. Let's keep our integrity. Let's keep our egalitarian ethos. But let's be factual about the opportunities we have here, the privilege that comes from living here, if you like.
And try not to be to bristle too much if we decide to shamelessly promote all the great things
in a very
that are going on.
North Dakota way. When I first heard about the Wonder Fund, I was like, Kevin O'Leary, the Shark Tank guy, did we just get a showboat kind of thing? And then in a very North Dakota way, I asked people I trust, and someone I trust was Canadian, ex-Canadian. They've lost their minds up there temporarily. And he knew Kevin in his Canada days, and oh no, he's very, very sharp, high integrity, really good guy. And then I met you and other people with your organization now multiple times, and then cross-triangulating your experiences with other people in North Dakota multiple times. And it'd be nice if we could figure out how to speed that up, because it takes a long time to build that up. But you guys have done a great job, in my opinion, at establishing your say-do ratio, establishing your integrity, meeting us where we are, and building that and earning that trust. So me personally, enjoy the hell out of when Kevin is usually wearing shorts and sandals and a suit top,
I have to tell you a little bit about that. I mean, because what we found, and this was kind of a COVID phenomenon, everybody's at home, all of a sudden Kevin's building out a studio in his own home to broadcast to the networks because nobody's going in. And let's say, Fox does a hit and brings Kevin on, and they'll put that out there through their social. Kevin was taking that raw footage and recutting it and using side cams during COVID, because we learned that kind of behind the scenes, coverage was something that people were interested at. And now all of a sudden we realize that we're getting more engagement than even the network themselves. And we woke up to the fact that Kevin himself is his own network. All right. So some of that behind the scenes stuff, I mean, people need to understand, and it needs to be said, that Kevin, the TV personality, is not Kevin the man. And I described it earlier, but he is a heart-centered guy. He's a family man, and he's an inspirational and charismatic leader. And he doesn't do anything that he's not passionate about. He's highly disciplined in that way. So if he's here in North Dakota, it's for good reason, and it's a reflection of the people that you are and the opportunities that exist. It's just that simple. But I understand that his kind of outward persona, or the celebrity factor, is anathema to the culture of North Dakota. Also,
we're getting better. We're getting better. We have digital natives here too, and I like the fourth wall breaking that he does. And you can actually see the set, and that it's suit up top and casual. I mean, it's both performative and authentic at the same time. I mean, it is its own kind of.
Well, can you imagine being in that uniform all day,
Yeah.
every day?
Yeah.
So, I mean, dropping trout,
Yeah.
if the camera's not, focused on that is a
it's
more
more-
comfortable way
and it's honest.
to operate.
It's
and people here
performatively
dress
honest.
for comfort. We're very suited up in the cities, and when we travel globally. And I like the fact that it's a little bit more casual, and people dress for comfort here. And at the end of the day,
My tracksuit is in the cleaners.
yeah, it comes down to execution skills. If you do what you say you're going to do and you get the job done, people are going to recognize that more than the performative stuff.
Well, North Dakota nice, North Dakota proud. We got to find what that is, and I would say we need to be more self-aware of North Dakota smart, and why it is. Why do we have a state bank? Why do we have a state mill? What are the strategic reasons for that? And they were to keep the value add in the state and to support ourselves when it was a little bit harder to get that support from outside. And I would say that in 2024 here, North Dakota smart also means how do we find the right strategic, trusted partners from outside the state and outside the country, and how do we leverage this interesting pivot of time technologically, where and inevitably tied, just like the internet, just like phones. I mean, the compute AI revolution, whatever it is, whatever we're going to call it. It's going to be very impactful to everybody, and this is a time to be North Dakota smart. When we look at our nascent entrepreneurial ecosystems, whether that's around ag tech, or whether that's around UAVs, or that's around energy, or that's around healthcare and manufacturing, how do we make sure that we're being as synergistic and as smart, and know the power that we have by being a big small town? And I think that those advantages that we have leveraged with the outside scaffolding with the shared values is really going to make the next several decades potentially extraordinarily successful for North Dakota. And I thank you for helping us be a North Dakota cheerleader, and I thank you for the boots on the ground due diligence to bring outside money to work and to put our inside money to smart work. Anything else that you'd want to maybe would end in this from a related to O'Leary here? Young entrepreneurs, if you got a young entrepreneur, they're thinking about maybe leaving the state. They think they need to go to a large community to get the critical mass of other founders and money. And there's truth to those things. But if they're thinking about maybe staying, maybe they got an ag tech play, maybe they got a UAV play, and they're thinking about the pros and cons of that, and they're a North Dakotan going through undergrad, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them that it's important for a young person to spread their wings, and I understand the instinct and desire to go on an adventure and try new things and look outside the tent, okay? So that's not a problem, okay? But I would also tell them what I know you're going to find there is at the end of the day, you might have gone to get away from the things that give you stress. You're going to have it tenfold where you're going, that this is a magical place. And the world we live in today is a place where you have more flexibility. So you can get a job, you can start to work for a company, you can live here and you can still travel, and you can still wander, and you can still have adventure, and you can still learn about new things. I would tell them to stay inspired and stay open. But at the end of the day, North Dakota is a place that I found after a lifetime of travel globally that is magical and unparalleled in a great many ways. So ultimately, if they, and every family and every young child has a fundamental right to feeling safe and secure, and that's lost. in a lot of places, and you have it here in North Dakota. So consider staying here. And if you got to go for a little while, but come back. That's what I would tell them.
Well, thank you for coming here.
And I would also say to you, I detect a T-shirt business that we might have just created, because you said it's North Dakota nice, North Dakota proud, North Dakota small. North Dakota. No, one big small town on the back of the T-shirt, and then North Dakota smart. Yeah, that might be a T-shirt.
All right. Well, we could get national exposure. I don't know. I don't know how what the Sharks would think of we'd have to figure out each state, right? Would get a T-shirt. At
least the podcast should have a T-shirt.
We put that on the list.
And then I'd be walking out of here with some swag today, which would have been a nice form
That's
of
right.
compensation.
That's where the autistic engineer screws things up. Is you're right. Yeah.
Also a superpower.
Superpower with also a superpower with some blind spots. Asymmetries all around. We're all unique individuals. Well, thank you for coming to North Dakota, and thank you for repeatedly coming back. And I look forward to our future visits, and all the work that you do, all the work that Kevin does. We see the passion, we see the commitment, and let's build the future together.
I love it, and I'll say on behalf of myself and the team that we are grateful to be here, and we feel blessed. And so onward and upward.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Todd.